Hello.
Hi, how are you?
Good. How's the off season treating you?
I don't really have an off season.
Ah.
Yeah, well, because it's straight into other stuff. I don't really cover games, so I don't have an off season.
The business of football never sleeps. That's for sure.
Indeed, that's right.
So you, like lots of people in your recent piece in The Athletic, couldn't help but notice that Chelsea seemed to be selling quite a few players to the Saudi Pro League, or certainly lots of their players have been linked to the Pro League. N'Golo Kante, what a player he was, by the way, sadly departs Premier League shores, and Koulibaly is the latest to head for the Saudi Pro League. There is speculation around Hakim Ziyech, around Aubameyang, Callum Hudson-Odoi, Mendy, you name it. And so people have said, well, what is going on here? And well, you can pick up the story from here. They have drawn the link between Chelsea and their majority owner, Clear Lake Capital, and the Saudi PIF. And it's almost certain the Saudi PIF has investments in Clear Lake Capital, who own Chelsea. So there's a degree here of, well, you know, we want Chelsea and Clear Lake and their investment to do well. So let's see if we can all help everybody out.
There you go. That's basically it in a nutshell. And that was doing the rounds about a week ago, maybe sort of 10 days ago. And the idea was that Public Investment Fund, which has bought Newcastle, no doubt about that, 80% of Newcastle, and had very recently, so about 2.5-3 weeks ago, had just acquired or been given the 4 best teams in the Saudi Pro League, as part of the Saudi Pro League's privatisation or professionalisation, modernisation, whatever you want to call it, was helping another of its investments out, Chelsea. And as you say, while everyone talks about Todd Boehly is kind of the front man of this sort of large US syndicate that owns Chelsea. Most of the money comes from a private equity firm called Clear Lake. And they're a very successful private equity firm based in California, been around for, I think, 17 years. The football, this Chelsea investment, is a bit of a departure for them. They've never done anything like it before. They've been very, very successful at buying medium-sized American companies. And they do this in the way that every private equity firm does it. They basically raise money in these funds that have a start date and a finish date, and they have a kind of target amount that we want to raise, and they kind of give some clues as to the type of thing they want to do with this money. And they say, okay, who wants to invest with us? And we'll borrow more, we'll leverage up, and we'll go buy some companies. We're going to go buy some undervalued companies, and we're going to all make loads and loads of cash. We'll sell them in 5 years' time, 6-7 years' time, and we'll all be happy. And they've been really good at that. And the type of people that invest in Clear Lake and other private equity firms are pension companies, insurance companies, family offices, sovereign wealth funds, big banks, insurance companies. I might have said them already. So large financial institutions. And maybe typical is the wrong word. The last couple of Clear Lake investment funds have been big. So the last one was closed last year, 2022, had $14 billion in it. Had something like 300 different investors from 40 different countries. No one can have more than 5%. That's quite important. So no single investor can have more than 5% in a fund, and the average is about 1%. Now, the clues in the title, private equity, they don't really discuss who's in, who's out, right? But pretty much everybody in the industry knows, because it's not remotely surprising, because sovereign wealth funds do this, and the Norwegian sovereign wealth fund's probably in there, and the Singapore one, and so on and so on, and maybe some of your pensions in there too. I've almost certainly invested in Clear Lake funds. PIF have almost certainly invested, because, like I say, Clear Lake have been doing well, and PIF are everywhere now. PIF for the last 5, 6, 7 years, ever since Mohammed bin Salman has been in charge in Saudi Arabia, and there's been this huge push around diversifying the Saudi economy, using sport to do that. PIF has just gone, go sprinkle our fossil fuel wealth everywhere.
Well, on that point, sorry, brief interruption, because you made that point somewhere in the midst of your article. I hadn't fully realised that. So Saudi Arabia, from memory, discover oil in 1938, and then you say in your piece, the PIF starts in 1971 when they realise we have lots of money to invest on the basis of this discovery. I hadn't fully appreciated it's only as of 2014 that the PIF was given permission to invest in overseas firms.
Exactly.
So people are saying, why is it now all of a sudden like I can't cross the road without Saudi Arabia hitting me in the face? It's only we're a decade into them being allowed to invest in overseas firms.
Yeah, they've been. Here's a surprise. They've been very conservative with their money. So PIF, as sovereign wealth funds go, have been really boring. It wasn't very big.
Yeah.
There are other wealth funds in Saudi Arabia. That one in particular basically used some of the oil money to invest in purely Saudi projects. And again, this idea around diversifying the Saudi economy. So trying to get a bit of a one-trick pony, Saudi Arabia. It's an amazing pony, but it's not the most broad-brush, sophisticated modern economy, and that's very much the story in the entire region, and very much the story around MBS about what he wants to do with his vision for the country. So PIF's remit changed, and now starts to behave more like Norway's sovereign wealth fund, which it has owns a little bit of every major company in the world. So given permission to invest abroad. He emerges in about 2017, 2018. He kind of takes full control of PIF. Suddenly the best and brightest in Saudi Arabia are working for PIF. It's given more money. There's a little bit of pinching money from other people, which we don't want to go too much into a story about MBS. But this PIF fund just grows and becomes Saudi Arabia's its pension fund, this great big endowment fund for all the good things that MBS wants to do for Saudi Arabia. But equally, it becomes like his private bank to deliver his vision. Everything from, metros in Riyadh to a better airport to amazing futuristic tourist cities on the Red Sea to sport, the lot. PIF is now the sort of bank of MBS. And that is part of the bigger Saudi story. But to go back to the conspiracy theory, you have a fund that is still pretty conservative. It's just investing everywhere, sprinkling its money everywhere. Probably almost certainly investing with Clearlake. Like I said, it can be no more than 5% of any single fund, and Clearlake have had something like 13, 14 different funds. Clearlake has 60% at Chelsea, so already you can start to see the dilution. And crucially, when Chelsea takeover happened, when Clearlake came to the Premier League and said, hi guys, this is what we want to do, and we're going to be providing 60% of the money, they were vetted internally and externally by experts at the Premier League, because they were concerned, right? Is there any Saudi money here? Is there a potential conflict of interest with Newcastle United, et cetera, et cetera? So we had a promise made in 2022. No, there's no Saudi money in our purchase of Chelsea. We have the sort of general story around private equity and what PIF does and how Clearlake works, and there is no real degree of control here. And then we have the sort of football story, which, as you say, is a lot of surplus players, expensive, not many buyers in Europe. I think also one thing that has perhaps been underreported or not talked about enough is that a lot of those guys that Chelsea made available are Muslim, and they certainly fit the profile of the type of player that the Saudi Pro League wants. Famous, will be comfortable here, will resonate in the region. And I think, people have sort of put two and two together and come up with blah, blah, blah. And for me, it just seemed like a bit of a knee-jerk, typical sort of football thing, although that lot over there appear to be up to something. And then I would marry that with something which I think is really interesting, and I have enormous amounts of sympathy for, is a general unease and uncertainty that I think lots of football fans in lots of different countries feel at the moment. Who really owns our clubs? We've let sovereign wealth funds do it. We've let state-backed clubs. We now have multi-club models. We have private equity, and I think there's just a sort of loss of control. Where once upon a time, I'm turning the clock back a long way, it was the local boy made good, or it might be a fan-owned club, and you kind of knew there was a relationship, a link. You could sort of say, well, I'm a bit like that person. Now you don't even know who the person is, and that, I think, is why this conspiracy theory came up so quickly. And I think there'll be another one tomorrow, and there'll be another one next week. This is just where we're at with our feelings about who owns our clubs.
And so why does 2 + 2 not equal blah de blah in this case?
Well, for me, it's just, that's not really how PIF operate, how Clear Lake operate. I really don't think PIF are doing this to help Chelsea out, to protect their investment in Clear Lake. It just doesn't make sense. I'm not sure they within the sort of capital structure of any of Clear Lake's investments, they'd have that kind of power. What's far more likely, and I'm sorry, this story is as old as the hills, and I can think of loads of different examples of how this has operated forever in sport, particularly football, is personal relationships. So that might have greased the wheels a little bit here. Oh, brilliant! You know, Saudi Pro League, you're going on a mad tear, are you? Great. Well, look, we've got half a dozen players who here they are. And the fact that Todd Boehly not only has this relationship with clearly, but he has a property business called Kane International that one of the other directors at Chelsea works for too, called Jonathan Goldstein. Last year, independent of Chelsea, independent of Clear Lake, they actually did a joint venture with PIF in a luxury hotel brand in the region. So there are personal contacts. So again, one of the reasons the conspiracy theory kind of really blew up was because that Boehly was in Saudi Arabia a couple of weeks ago doing Todd Boehly business, but he also managed to sort of stop some pictures with Saudi football officials. So look, I totally understand where it came from. I just don't think it makes business sense. And I also think that if PIF really wanted to help a football team out, they'd help Newcastle out, which is why I think the Ruben Neves story is a potentially better story. He's a more interesting purchase by the Saudi Pro League anyway, in that he is young and very desirable. Other European teams would love to have him, and yet he's chosen to go. If he were, as has been suggested, and no one's owning up to this one at all, in fact, they're denying it, but if he were to be loaned back at a very mate's rate to Newcastle United, well, that would make a lot more sense. That red flags, away we go. The Chelsea link just seems tenuous to me, and I also think it was a little bit. Well, hold on a minute. We've got this story of half a dozen guys that might go. Here we are. It's like almost 9 days on since I wrote the piece. Kante went, but don't forget Chelsea wanted to keep Kante, and that was a free transfer. Chelsea didn't want to lose him; they just lost him on wages. Koulibaly has gone. The others haven't gone yet. Yeah, and yet other clubs who have nothing to do with PIF or Clear Lake, they're going to sell players to the Saudi Pro League as well.
Okay. Well, that's fair enough. Chelsea's finances generally, given that they were noting significant losses in advance of Todd Boehly and Clear Lake's arrival, and then subsequent to that spent 600 million on dubious quality in many instances, but 600 million nonetheless. Are Chelsea in any kind of financial bother? Not so much going bankrupt, but just financial fair play bother?
It's a really good question, and the honest answer is we don't really know, or I don't know. You're right. We can all sketch out the numbers, and it would appear that they're right up against it. Don't forget, with financial fair play, it's a rolling 3-year assessment. If we go back 3 years ago, they actually were in credit, so they've had 2 losses. They've got 2 big losses on their books that would appear to blow the financial fair play allowance. However, as ever with financial fair play, you can take some things off. Okay, so there's a sort of set idea of good losses, so money you spend on your academy, your women's team, infrastructure. So that there's some deductions to be made there. I think Chelsea will also be able to argue that they had some sort of one-off unique losses around the time that they were put up for sale. when the asset was basically frozen and Abramovich was forced to sell. If you remember, they weren't allowed. They basically lost access to their bank account. They weren't allowed to sell merchandise. Even sort of ticketing and hospitality was all massively impacted. So I think they might be able to argue, look, that those two big losses, certainly one of them is a little bit unfair. I think it'd be definitely true to say, though, given the amount they spent and the almost certain loss they're going to make in the year we haven't seen the accounts for yet, so last season, they've got to sell. They've got to sell players. They've been clever also with the amount of money they spent on players, in that they've given them all very long contracts. That's to sort of stretch what they call amortization, how you account for your spending. So while it was a huge spending spree, it will be stretched over 5-6 years, and for people like Mudryk, 8 years. So they've been quite cute. That loophole is, I think, is now going to be closed. But well done them. They spotted it. There are some risks, of course. They've got to pay these guys those contracts for a long, long time. So I think the honest answer is we don't really know, but they almost certainly have to sell players. But hey, look, they're doing it. And this is the other thing about this sort of Saudi story that will help. It will certainly. I don't think they're going to get big money. I think nearly all of them will be book losses. They'll certainly help get the wages off the books. But I would look to things like getting Jorginho sold, Kovacic sold, Havertz. Those are decent wedges of cash to Premier League teams. So, I think there's going to be a bit of an overhaul there, but I suspect they're going to be okay because they've always said we're aware of the FFP issue and we're going to be okay.
Very curious for your thoughts on the Saudi Pro League. The first thought I suspect many of us had given it in a very long time, if not ever, was when Ronaldo pitched up there, and then was Messi going to go? In the end, he didn't. And now I just put Saudi Pro League into Google News, and it's Sadio Mane makes decision on Saudi Pro League transfer. Roberto Firmino agrees Saudi Pro League transfer. Koulibaly, all of these stories. Yeah. So my sense from what they did with Live Golf is they didn't mess around, and they've managed to get themselves pretty much a seat at the table in golf very, very quickly by spending huge amounts of money, maybe 2 billion all told, and they signed lots of big name players, and you suspect that seat at the table of golf now is going to be far more influential than golf cares to admit. So I don't know, they say that the quickest way for us mere mortals to waste a ton of money is to drive our new car out of the garage. I mean, the same probably applies to buying all these big name players like Ronaldo and Benzema. Initially with the Ronaldo thing, I thought, they just want like something shiny there in the midst of the league, and yet this seems to have kick-started something. So I mean, I can't work out, is there like it'll be opium for the masses and my subjects will get to watch lots of big name footballers, or is this a more strategic, why don't we have the best league in the world?
Well, I think it's a little bit of all of that, right? So there is an opium bread and circuses element to this. Dictators, autocratic regimes quite like sports, quite like football, and in a region where I guess religion's the most important thing, probably football second most important. So having that kind of having a connection with the people is important. So that's part of it. I think there are more positive reasons that Saudi Arabia is doing it. It makes sense to me for a few, and I'll sort of run through them. One, they really like football. It's not, for me, contrived or forced in a way that I often felt it was in Qatar. They are football mad. They have a big population. They have a young population. Football is undisputably the number one sport. Their national team's not bad. They beat Argentina. Their club sides, I know I didn't care about what was going on in the Saudi Pro League, but I at least was aware that the best Saudi club sides did well in the Asian Champions League and would sometimes rock up in the Club World Cup. They have some good teams, and I'm told the buzz and the banter in Riyadh and Jeddah before a big game is good. There's a fan culture in Saudi Arabia, so it makes a lot more sense to sort of, we are going to be the best in the region, and why not? Why couldn't our league be the best in Asia? I mean, those seem like attainable goals to me, and not far-fetched or daft. And we know that, in the Gulf, there's sort of one-upmanship and pride and all that. Yeah, that makes sense to me that Saudi Arabia, having seen what Qatar, little Qatar achieved with the World Cup and seen the headway, the head start perhaps they'd given the UAE, would go, right, we're not having that. We're the biggest country, the most important country in the region. We're going to have the best league. And then I think you often I talk to Saudi people about this, and they say, no, this makes sense. There's a sort of public health issue here. I mentioned the big young population. They're not particularly healthy. They have bad diabetes and obesity stats. So there is a public health story here. And we shouldn't be sniffy about that. Every Western government tells that story when they bid for an Olympics or a World Cup. It's an important part of the messaging. And then I think I go back to my point a few minutes ago. What alternative does Saudi Arabia have? They must diversify their economy. They must. They have a window, a fossil fuel window. They've got loads and loads of cash now, loads. They've got to do something. And they're going tourism, leisure, sport. It is all part of the mix. So we know about the F1 races. We know about golf, as you've mentioned, WWE, the boxing, tennis next. They are going all in on sport. So when I see the Saudi Pro League, like everybody else, I'm thinking North American Soccer League. Yeah. I'm thinking Packer and the cricket, the World Series of Cricket. I'm thinking, all the kind of where you throw money at it, you try and get some attention. The Chinese Super League, all of those. There's definite risk of that. But I do see a plan. I see a rationale. They've definitely got the cash, the ambition. I think they've got, some serious hurdles to get over. It's not going to be for everyone. I think it was really interesting that Messi went to Miami and he talked about it being, the sort of family issues being part of it, kind of quality of life, what his wife and family wanted to do. I think that's going to be an issue. Certain players just won't fancy it. I think the overall quality of the league is really poor. I was talking to some analysts who measure these things. And prior to this wave of players going there, but after Ronaldo, they had the Saudi Pro League as about the 50th best league in the world. 50. I mean, that's, and nowhere near the best league in Asia. Japan was the best league in Asia. Now Ronaldo's talking about, we're going to be top 5. They're talking more privately, we can be top 10 in 2030-ish. Okay. We shall see, right? We shall see.
Yeah. No, it all makes sense. It's a fascinating answer. You've explained all that so well. So best of luck with the next question. I can't help but notice Manchester United hasn't been sold yet.
We talked about that about 6 months ago.
And I felt at that time there was a great sense of urgency. It's like round 2 of bidding this Friday, Matt. This will be wrapped up by Tuesday.
Yeah. If I gave you that impression, I apologise.
No, you didn't. You didn't. No. I think the sense was just hang on here. Yeah. Will the Glazers sell it all?
Yeah, good. Well, look at me. How clever I was. I'm struggling to maintain interest in this story.
Same. Yeah.
I know it's important. My bosses keep telling me it's important. But I've got to the point now where I'm just waiting for the press release. I'll be happy with that. The idea that there's a sort of live story here and we have to chase every avenue. It's become a saga, and the clues were all there at the beginning. Go back to the original press release. We're going to explore strategic alternatives. We may end up just doing nothing. They obviously don't put it that way, but it's all the clues are there. They really wanted to whip up an auction. That kind of Chelsea, 4 big guys going for it with a proper deadline. That didn't happen. They very quickly realised they had 2, and you had Qataris who all their messaging, the sensible people, not necessarily people shouting on social media, were, we're going to be disciplined. We are tired of people thinking we're just daft Arabs and we're going to throw money at this. Because if we throw money at this one, we'll get, we've got hundreds of other deals to do in other sectors. Those days are gone. We're going to be disciplined about this. And there was quite a key message. I think it was an interview with Bloomberg or someone like that, where Sheikh Jassim's dad, who's very probably the money behind this whole caper, HBJ is called, former Prime Minister of Qatar, ludicrously wealthy guy, kind of voiced his, I'm not so sure about this football stuff, but, kind of, my son appears to like it. But, there was a bit of a clue there. We're not going to get taken for mugs. And on the other side, you have Sir Jim Ratcliffe, whose entire business career is based on being the last guy standing, on spotting value, on going eyeball to eyeball with people and saying, you want how much for that? Right, you can have this much. And I will walk. And he has built his Ineos is basically about 30 different businesses where he's done this again and again and again, just bolting them on. Right. So it was a bit of a nightmare for the guys running the auction. Oh, God, these two. Which is why we've had these ludicrous rounds of trying to get them, inching them up to this number that they promised the Glazers that they're not going to attain. And then, so that's the problem, if you like, on one side. And then on the selling side, do they really want to sell all of them? Some of the family do, but not all of them. Do they want to sell right now? If they don't get the number they had in their mind, will they wait? Do they get bothered by protests like there was outside the mega store today? No. Have they ever been bothered by anything? They live in Florida. They don't have much to do with the club. So there's been no energy in this auction. There's been no sense of urgency, and everything's drifting. The club appears to be drifting a bit at the moment as well, but that's not unusual in a sort of summer window at United. And I've lost interest. I've lost interest in the kind of because it was quite exciting for a while. Oh, Jim Ratcliffe, yeah, interesting guy. He's really into sport now, and he's got a good backstory to tell. But he's got some issues as well. And then you've got Qatar. All right, that whole debate again. And what are they going to do with PSG and how are they going to prove separation? I'm just bored now. And when I talk to Man United fans, they're bored.
Yeah. A final word or sense of the European transfer market in general this summer. It's been a long season. There was a 70 million bid for Harry Kane on Bayern Munich's part, rejected. Jude Bellingham has gone to Bayern Munich. But just casually, and Chelsea aside, keeping an eye on the market, doesn't seem like it's particularly busy or big spending, or there's an Erling Haaland type figure where we're all, where's he going to go? Or, in previous years, there's a Gareth Bale type transfer, which will then trigger a whole bunch of spending elsewhere as a result. Feels like calm, quiet, for whatever reason. That be your read?
Yeah, it would. I'm not our transfer guy. I'm not a transfer expert, but it was good that you reminded me. Because I was going to say, has there been a transfer? You reminded me. Bellingham's gone through.
But that's it really.
But it was so sort of like we kind of as soon as we realised that Liverpool weren't in it was almost inevitable it was Real. That's a good one, right? Well done them. But Kane already rejected. I mean, that's Daniel Levy's not going to agree the first time, is he, on anything? I think Rice will be interesting. That one seemed, there's going to be a resolution there. He will go. West Ham clearly have 100 million in mind. So then you're often right. It takes one, doesn't it? Because then someone has some cash to spend, and various other deals get unblocked. But no, it hasn't happened yet for me. I've yet to, whilst I'm now really bored with the Man United saga, I've yet to get really excited about the summer transfer window.
Yes, and there's no obvious reason as to why clubs might be a touch more reticent financially this summer as opposed to other summers. Anything obvious jumping out?
Well, the obvious thing is that the rest of Europe is still struggling to recover from COVID. So I think that if I make a serious point, if you look at last summer and particularly January, where English clubs, I think, spent 4 times as much as the other big 5 leagues together. And I think if you go summer and winter, so last season, the Premier League spent more than the other 4 together as well. So it's just remarkable. The only real action is here, in England, sorry. So that's an issue. We've been waiting for Real. Okay, Real have gone big on Bellingham. Barca, traditional big spenders, they're still struggling. They're still looking for frees. Gundogan is a great acquisition, but he's a free. PSG haven't shown their hand yet, have they? So that'll be interesting.
No, and they seem to be grappling with what's Mbappe going to do and
exactly
what to do about Neymar. Do interest rates affect these echelons?
Yeah. They do. Yeah, look, it's more that rising interest rates is a cost of business if you're borrowing money. So it's interesting that Man United, we were talking about them. Their net borrowings are about 650 million now. So that's a cost of business.
Yeah.
And we know that Man United, they talk about, is this takeover impacting on their business? And it's not really. What's impacting on their business is their FFP calculation. They've got about 100 million to spend. So the Qataris could come in tomorrow and it's not really going to change that. 100 million plus whatever they make on player trading, which at Man United is almost always not very much because they're rubbish at selling players. But look, the rest of Europe has kind of stopped spending. And if it's not Real and it's not Barca anymore and PSG haven't done anything yet, and Bayern are always a bit cautious, maybe they will get Kane, that'd be good. That will, kickstart something here. The Italian clubs haven't been spending money for 2 or 3 seasons now. The action is sort of driven by the Premier League, and we just haven't quite seen that one deal yet that unlocks the other deal. So that's the story.
Yeah. Very good. Well, as ever, Matt Slater on The Athletic is very much recommended reading from our vantage point. Matt, pleasure to have you on. Thank you.
Lovely talking to you.